Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast about your Kindle, books, and all things Amazon. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is April 19th, 2019. Welcome to you from downtown Denver, Colorado on a beautiful sunny night. We're about to head out to the Tattered Cover bookstore to hear Austin Kleon read from his new book, Keep Going. And I won't be able to finish up the show before we leave, but then after I get back, we'll have it up hopefully sometime before midnight. My conversation this week is with a young man who works at Amazon on the Kindle team. His name is Allen Hughes, and he had a particular role in the development of the new basic Kindle, which began shipping last week.
Having a low everyday price tends to attract more new to category customers, folks who haven't given a dedicated e-reader device a chance before.
Also this week, I'm going to talk to you about an article I came across from 20 years ago in Wired magazine that has some stories about Jeff Bezos I've never seen before and fascinating insights from that period of the company's history that explain some of the things that are happening now. And we're also going to have a long, helpful tech tip email sent to us by listener Tom Semple. Let's jump in. The news story that I'd like to share with you this week is one that's about 20 years old, and I was following a story about predictions that Jeff Bezos had made 20 years ago that had come out to be true, and then this was a link going further back, and this one really fascinated me. It was in Wired magazine on March 1st, 1999, written by Chip Bayers, and it's titled The Inner Bezos. That's a really long piece, about 8,600 words. And it starts with a story. You know, you hear these stories about Bezos and you kind of hear the same stories. This is one I've just never heard before. And it's set at about Christmas 1997 in a Florida resort named Amelia Island. And it's a convenience store, Flash Foods convenience store. And the story starts out saying that they've got 4 commandos that are doing a timed purchase of a quart of milk. And one of them's in the car, one of them is buying the milk, one of them's keeping a lookout, and they're all sort of pretending to be commandos doing this operation at this convenience store in Florida. Well, it turns out that one of the commandos is named Fej Sozeb, and that's Jeff Bezos backwards. And the other is his father, Mike Bezos, and the other is his brother, I think he's Mark Bezos, and then his mother, Jackie, is at the wheel of the rented Chevy Suburban. And they just set this thing up. It's like cosplay or a sort of role-playing thing where they had to buy a carton of milk and they turned it into this operation. Well, this story has all kinds of things which delight me. One of them is that 20 years later, Amazon Go is kind of organized around how fast can you get into a store to get perhaps a gallon of milk or some other thing. And I wonder if anywhere in the development of Amazon Go, Jeff Bezos was remembering the commando raid on Flash Foods in Amelia Island. When you see things like this that stretch out over years, I find them really fascinating. And then the other part of it is, he was a grown man at that point. He was in his 30s. He wasn't a kid, but he's acting like a kid with his family. And the imagination and the adventure of going into this store and turning it into a little drama. And then just it's almost a parable because they're messing with retail. They're taking a very traditional store selling milk and they're turning it into this adventure. And I think they might have even had walkie-talkies that they were talking to each other when they did it. So this becomes a delightful part of the Bezos canon that I found this story in this Wired magazine. And the piece goes on to sort of project forward the ambitions that Bezos was already talking about. And one quote is, he says, "Strip malls are history." And some of the things which are said, not quite yet, but you can certainly see that the trends that he was pursuing of Amazon being able to sell everything and focus on the customers, this story is not all that far off, even when it starts talking about what things are going to be like in 2020. There's also quite a powerful quote. Bezos is talking about consumerism at its worst. And he says consumerism at its worst is getting people to buy things that don't actually improve their lives. The one thing that offends me the most is when I walk by a bank and see ads trying to convince people to take out second mortgages on their homes so they can go on vacation. That's approaching evil. Kind of a morality to being customer focused, and this is something I think is actually part of Bezos's makeup. The other insight I got, we've known that Jeff's mother's father, Lawrence Preston Pop Giese, it's G-I-S-E. I'm not exactly sure how you would say that. Giese, maybe. The stories that we hear are how Jeff used to go to his ranch each summer when he was a boy. And so I've always thought of, Pop Giese as this rancher guy, and kind of homespun and filling Bezos with lots of knowledge about life as they were branding cattle and doing the other things you do on a ranch. Well, it turns out that this maternal grandfather was in space technology at DARPA. That I think that's the military. I don't know what that stands for, but it's basically at the source of the internet back in the 50s. And then after that, he supervised 25,000 Atomic Energy Commission employees in the West. And he was the labs that he was over were Sandia Labs, Los Alamos, and Lawrence Livermore Labs, three of the most famous labs for the Atomic Energy Commission. After all that, he returned to South Texas to this ranch in 1968, and Jeff was born in 1964. So, as he was growing up, and his boyhood would have all been about Pop, his grandfather, at the ranch. So there's some pretty high-powered history on that side of the family, Bezos' mother. And that was the grandfather that when she became pregnant as a 17-year-old in a public school, I think in Albuquerque, he went into the school and said, "You will not force this girl to stop her studies because she's pregnant. You're going to educate her like you do everyone else." And there was an echo there of a fairly strong character and who was standing up for his daughter in a challenging position to be a teenage bride back then in Albuquerque. This story ends with a quote which I loved because it's got an echo or maybe a prelude to the 2018 letter to shareholders by Bezos. In this article in Wired, he's quoted as saying, "One of the things that I hope will distinguish Amazon.com is that we continue to be a company that defies easy analogy. This requires a lot of innovation, and innovation requires a lot of random walk." Now, random walk isn't quite the exact words that he mentioned in the most recent letter to shareholders. He called it wandering. And one reference to that in the shareholders letter says, "Wandering is an essential counterbalance to efficiency. You need to employ both. The outsized discoveries, the nonlinear ones, are highly likely to require wandering." So he's talking about it as random walks 20 years ago, and he's still seeing the advantages of wandering and that part of things. I just got back from listening to Austin Kleon talk about his new book, Keep Going, at the Tatter Cover here in Denver. And he had an interesting, I think it came in the Q&A, someone said, what were you most like, what age are you now most like when you were growing up? And he thought about it. He thought it was a great question. So did I. And he said, "I think I'm more like I was when I was 10 years old than I was when I was 19. And he was saying that when he was 10, he was a writer, he was a drawer. He hadn't been forced or incented by school to separate as, am I going to be a writer or am I going to go off with the artistic kids? He just kept them both. When he was later in his teens, I think he abandoned some of that unity of artistic creation, but as an adult who's really worked on what does art mean in his life, and that's the source of these three great books that he's written about art. He's back to being a 10-year-old, and he does have sort of a childlike way of talking about things quite simply, and I find in an inspiring way. I have a feeling that Jeff Bezos if he were asked that question, say, well, what age do you feel most akin to now? And I wouldn't be surprised if he'd pick around 10. This article has some other escapades that he did, an entrepreneurial thing. He's setting up a camp for kids, and when he was a 10-year-old, I think he was full of wonder, full of hijinks. I don't know if the Star Wars stuff started that early, but his sort of playful, wandering strategy at Amazon, as huge as it is, reminds me of the energy of a 10-year-old. So that would be an interesting biographical experiment to see if you could really draw the lines between what this kid was doing when he was 10 and what he's doing now as the head of Amazon. So I'll have a link to that in the show notes. The Inner Bezos by Chip Bayers in Wired magazine. Another indication, another thing I like about this is Wired magazine. I just think it's one of the best magazines around for the future, technology, just smart stuff. And here's a piece. If you had read this piece 20 years ago and you were trying to say, well, yeah, do I want to buy Amazon stock, or what do I think is going to happen from this company? I think you would have been left saying, this guy is coming from a very original place, and his aspirations for what he's going to do to revolutionize retailing. If you'd taken this article seriously 20 years ago in Wired, you would have been pretty well served by it. And I think that quality of writing is still very characteristic of Wired. For the tech tip, I want to share an email that I received last week from Tom Semple, and it's on this new read-unread filter that is going to be added to the software of the Kindle. It's being rolled out, and you'll hear more about it in my conversation with Allen Hughes. Tom wrote, if you've been paying attention to release notes, Amazon has been letting us know they were going to be adding a read-unread filter to Kindle and Kindle mobile apps for iOS and Android. It showed up this morning on my iPhone and my Kindle when I fired it up this afternoon. The required software updates came out a week or two ago, but the features were not activated until today, as far as I can tell. So on Kindle 6th generation or later, I think you need 5.1.1 or 5.1.1.1, depending on the model, and a recent iOS or Android Kindle app version. Now, he explains how this works. Now each book has a property that can be toggled between read and unread, read or unread. I believe that a book is automatically set to read status when you get to the end of the book and the before you go screen comes up, whether or not Goodreads or is linked. But you can also toggle it manually. A read tag appears in library views for those books which have the property set to read, so it's easy to identify books that you have not read when browsing in any view mode or collection. Tom says, reviewing my library, it appears many of the books I have in fact read do not have read status, but the Before You Go BYG feature and its Goodreads reading status mirroring has only existed for 2 or 3 years, so books prior to that would not have the associated data. In any case, read status is independent of current reading position apart from needing to navigate to the end of the book to trigger the BYG screen, which you can also bring up without going to the end of the book, he says. So people will need to set it up manually for anything that they read a while back. You do that with a long press on the item to bring up the menu with the option. There's no need to download. Prior to this, Tom says, I've maintained collections for previously read and to be read, but not always consistently. Once I make a pass through these to make sure they have the proper read status, I can just delete them, and for the most part, anything I read going forward will automatically get read status when I finish it. So that's an interesting take on it, and we're going to hear more about it in the conversation with Allen Hughes. I said, now I had asked him a question during our conversation. I said, when this update comes, will it automatically go back and mark all the books in my archive? Because I've maybe got 100 books that I've bought and I just haven't read yet. So I was wondering if it will say, I haven't seen that book open. We're going to call that unread. He wasn't sure about that. So I deleted the question when we were recording, but they got back to me afterward and they provided this answer. When you receive the software update, books you've previously finished will be marked as read in your library and synced across your reading devices, including Kindle, Fire Tablet, and free Kindle apps for iOS and Android. Customers can also manually choose to mark books they've finished reading. Now, I think Tom may have seen something here that they didn't actually include in this answer, because if there's automatic marking of books, it may not work before the time that the Goodreads integration was giving you the opportunity to mark books as read. I think that's what he was saying. But at least in the more recent purchases, this marking of books as read is going to be done automatically. I think that's going to be good. I'll be curious to see when it hits my devices so I can try it out. Time now for the interview. Allen Hughes earned a bachelor's degree in finance at the University of Iowa in 2002 and an MBA at the Harvard Business School in 2009. After HBS, he worked at Best Buy for 2 years before joining Amazon in 2012 as Senior Manager, Account Management and Sales Operations. In that job, he managed retailer relationships and sales operations for Fire Tablet and Kindle e-reader sales to U.S. retailers like Best Buy, where he'd worked before. 2 promotions later, he is currently Director, Sales and Marketing for Kindle e-readers and Fire Tablets. I caught up with Allen on Wednesday, April 17th by Skype in Seattle, and I began by asking him just what his current responsibilities cover at Amazon.
My team is responsible for what we call the go-to-market strategy. So basically, we work with our product marketing team to understand what customers are interested in, what technologies are available, what will really drive excitement from our customer base, work with the product management team to develop the roadmap, and then bring that roadmap to life. And the go-to-market process involves things like naming, pricing, positioning, which distribution channels we'll use, as well as staying close to the customer on what features will get the most excited about buying our products, what features will help drive usage of those products. And then that's kind of one part. The second part of the job is actually driving demand for our products once they launch. So in the go-to-market phase, we're creating kind of the foundation for a successful product launch and making sure we've got the right features highlighted and pulled forward for customers. In the once we've launched, we really are trying to drive demand. So I noticed on your site you linked to some of our promotional events. That's part of what my team does, ensuring that we have supply, making sure that we're working through our distribution partners to drive demand. So that's the other part of the job.
That's pretty cool, because you're really at sort of both ends of the process, the listening to the customer and imagining what they might want, and then making sure that people know about it and the demand is enhanced by the various tools that you have. Yeah,
it's pretty cool. We typical product development process maybe takes a year or two from kind of when we think of a product to we actually bring it to customers, and then we might sell it for 2 or 3 years if you've tracked some of our products. So we're thinking about these products, building the product, selling it, and 3 or 4 years could go by, and I get to be there for all of it, and it's fun to be part of that process.
Well, let's focus in on the new basic Kindle, which let's see, I think that shipped last week, right?
Correct. Yep. Started shipping last week.
And when the big change in that is the front lit screen, because the previous basic Kindle had a similar shape. It was the entry level Kindle, and this one with the light really is a big difference. I assume that must have come out of your listening to customers and getting guidance from them about how important it would be to add a light. But what can you say about the decision to make this kind of the most important improvement in the basic Kindle?
Sure. Yeah, it's not, as someone who's follows Amazon, I'm sure you're aware of our leadership principles, and customer obsession is one of our big kind of founding leadership principles. So it really starts with listening to the customer, and especially in a product category where we have some history, we have the advantage of looking through customer reviews and getting feedback. We go talk to customers in qualitative sessions. And what we found consistently was what customers loved about our Paperwhite product and our Voyage and our Oasis products that we've had is the screen, and the front light is a big feature of the screen. So that was pretty straightforward from a product development perspective to understand that would be a big win for customers. And we were really excited to bring that product to customers at a price point that's below $100 every day.
Now, I think this is probably the first time that the entry-level Kindle in its newest iteration has actually increased in price. It's now $90 as opposed to $80. I'm sure that must have factored into your analysis as well. How did you weigh the disadvantage of having to raise the price slightly with the advantage of adding the light?
Yeah, it's always a carefully, pricing is always a carefully considered decision, and we look to give as much value as we can to the customers. We were excited to bring a front lid product to customers under $100. Our previous Paperwhite product, the first product that we had with the front light was $119. So felt like it was a good discount from there. And so, we really were excited that we were able to, stay under 100 with the front light.
Mm-hmm. The other thing, the weight is slightly higher, 174 grams versus 160. I assume that's because you're adding some stuff to put those lights in.
That's certainly part of it. Anytime we develop a product, there's a number of factors that go into, making sure it's a durable product. It's got the features that we want. It's, staying apace with the latest technologies. And so while the front light was part of it, there's a few other architectural pieces that moved around as well. But what we were excited about was, maintaining a product that, for practical purposes is about half the weight of a typical paperback, as well as remaining the lightest item in our lightest product in our lineup.
There's something very pleasing about it. I mentioned it in last week's show when I had a chance to use the review copy. You read the specs, you see it, and you think, okay, new basic Kindle, cool. But to have it in my hands, especially when I wasn't using the cover, I don't know if the corners are more rounded or and I'm sort of comparing it with the Paperwhite actually, and thinking, this thing sort of feels like the Zen Kindle. It's just like it's right down to the minimalist basics. Still has the light, but it is that kind of a tactile advantage to it, something that kind of comes into the design process as you try this out with customers, or just your own sense of it? Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you're feeling that as you use it personally. One of the things that's unique with Kindle is we know customers will hold the device in their hands for hours on end, and so we take a lot of pride in ensuring that the device is comfortable to hold for extended reading periods. Personally, I tend to lay in bed at night, so I'm trying to hold the device above my head. So the weight factor you mentioned is very important, but also just the ability to hold with one hand and have it feel comfortable. And so we spend a good deal of time with the product and engineering teams making sure that the curvature of the device, the weighting of the device, the materials that we use feel great to hold in your hand. Make sure that it feels good for a typical human hand. So different people have different sizes of hands and different age ranges. So there's a lot that goes into it, but we're pleased with this device. It does feel great to hold in your hands, and that was a key design principle for us.
I was lining up, and I'm going to try to do a video comparison on this, but I had the new basic Kindle, my Paperwhite, and my Oasis, the latest version of the Oasis. When you go from the basic Kindle to the Paperwhite, the big change there is the flat surface of the Paperwhite. There's no bezel. There's no sort of a recess for the screen. And I remember when that change was introduced, I think last year, it seemed really cool and really sort of a great improvement for the Paperwhite. So then I was just sort of trying to say, well, why is that better? Dust can get caught in the bezel, or it's somehow not as sleek. But when you think about the design implications of a device that's flat all along the case of it, as opposed to dropping the screen in a recessed, what are the pros and cons, or how do you see those two choices in the design? Astute kind of observation of how the devices differ. When it comes to the flush front, from our perspective, it was a chance to make the Paperwhite that we introduced last year kind of have that sleek and modern feel to it. Consistent with what customers experience with tablets or smartphones that they probably have in their lives.
for some customers, it probably feels a little bit more pleasing to hold in the hand. And also, there's a practical piece of it: no crumbs, no dust that can get kind of trapped in there. That what we're proud of, though, is that we get offered choice to customers, and so we've able to have a lower price product that has a few less bells and whistles and stay under that $100, but include the feature customers like the most with the front light, while offering things like flush front and waterproof and more storage and a higher resolution screen as customers step up to the Paperwhite.
Now, in the sort of first part, the go-to-market, listening to customers, thinking of the next version of it, at that point, are you, or maybe now after you've been marketing it for a while and working on the demand side, are there types of customer groups that you think this Kindle is particularly well suited for? Students, people who don't read as many books as other readers, or it's a second Kindle for the beach, or what kinds of use cases in your experience in talking to customers does this one really stand out for?
Sure. So on the, from a customer perspective, price, remains an important consideration. And so having a low everyday price tends to attract more new to category customers, folks who haven't given a dedicated e-reader device a chance before. And so we like having that sub $100 price point, give customers a chance to enter into the category. So that's always an important factor for us when we think about, kind of pricing in our lineup and the choice that we offer. From a customer perspective, though, we find that customers, whether it's our entry Kindle, our Paperwhite, our Oasis program, you can find voracious readers at any of those devices, reading many, many books a month and, really enjoying their device and consistently using it every day. And so, that piece, the data is pretty interesting just on how customers use. But from who are we targeting? What we really focus on is kind of customers who want to start their journey with e-reading and who really want a chance to have that distraction-free experience, device they can take anywhere. They can read outside. They can read on the subway on the way to work. They could read on a park bench or at a beach. That battery that they don't have to charge every night like their smartphone that they most likely have in their pocket. And that, they can start taking advantage of the features that go beyond a book. So whether it's something simple like using the dictionary to look up a word, or using Vocabulary Builder to, perhaps tackle a more challenging book, those are the types of customers and the angle that we go after.
Yeah, and I've been surprised because some of my friends that I thought would be early ebook adopters turned out not to be, and I can imagine that the entry ramp onto the e-reader highway can occur at all ages, all demographics. There's some kind of a moment of readiness, especially for people that love books and love reading, that they finally say, gee whiz, my bookshelf's too full, or some kind of a triggering point that says, all right, I guess I'll try one of these Kindles 10 years after it was introduced. Do you have any insight either in your own circle or in things that you hear from customers of how does a late adopter finally decide to pick up a Kindle and start reading this way?
I'll give you my own personal story. This is somewhat sad that I'm sharing this, but I've been associated with e-readers largely on the kind of demand driving side for some time. I'd actually worked previously with Amazon when I was at Best Buy, kind of back in 2009, 2010. And so I've had e-readers in my home and in my life for a while, and I've read on them, but not consistently. And about a year ago, when I started in this category, I started to get more into the hardware side and start to understand the features. And kind of maybe 9 months ago, I really started to enjoy some of the e-reading features or Kindle features that I hadn't thought would matter, but really did. So one was, you mentioned kind of that endless shelf and really the ability to take a lot of books with you. My son started to read the Harry Potter series. I started to read the Harry Potter series alongside him. We kind of are reading at different paces, and he's reading at school. I'm reading, on the bus ride home. And while the first book is pretty thin, by the time you get to the fourth book, it is not thin anymore. It's not the fourth book; it's the fourth and fifth book jammed together. If you hear my son explain it, so that just being able to carry all those books made a difference. And then, as I started to read digitally, I realized just the weight and the how long I can read in the reading sessions really made a difference too. I'd read a little bit on my phone and certainly read physical books, but I think customers, as they get through that, first book or first few hundred pages of something, they really start to feel the benefits of the device, and then it becomes, yeah, this is my tool for reading. This is where I want to go to escape. This is where I want to go to just get lost in an author's world. And our job, or I see myself and the team focused on is, we got to get the device in a customer's hands and then really have great software and great content experiences that get them engaged. And that's led us to things like offering Kindle Unlimited as a extended free trial for customers. There's tons of great content in Kindle Unlimited, including all the Harry Potter books. Mm-hmm. That's led us to redesign the home screen a little bit so it's easier to find content and for customers to get into that first book and really have success reading. That's what tends to drive people from, yeah, that's just an interesting concept, and maybe I'll think about it too. Wow, this is really compelling, and I can see myself reading a lot of books this way.
I think too that there's some people that have been critics of Kindle and other e-readers for not being complex enough to give all of these different ways to organize the fonts and all this. Craig Maud, some other people I respect, and they're really looking at the product with a lot of intelligence. But I've always thought that because of what you just talked about, the person picks up the Kindle, tries it first. It's got to be an easy, low barrier experience. You're gonna learn how to get to the next page. Pretty easy to increase the font size. My wife has been sort of observing my passion for this for 10 years, and she doesn't highlight. She doesn't send, passages to Twitter. She doesn't use anything other than just reading a ton of books this way. And I think that if it would have been really tempting for your Kindle teams to say, gosh, it's been 10 years. Can't we start doing some really fancy, cool stuff that could have ended up being a barrier for customers that are coming in? And there are tools that if you want to, you can go and find a lot of, the highlighting stuff has gotten very sophisticated in the ability to get it. But is that a kind of a philosophy that you've had to just make this thing really easy to fall in love with and immerse yourself in? Yeah,
it kind of goes to the four kind of key focus areas for us for Kindle. So one is that great reading experience with the screen that allows you to read anywhere. So that's, I think we've, feel really good about what we've been able to do with the whole lineup there now. Two is that battery life, that you can kind of go anywhere, be anywhere for long periods of time. And then it really gets to the points I think you're highlighting, which is it's distraction free. So there's no Twitter, there's no tweets coming in, there's no iMessages or text messages, there's no internet browser to go get distracted by. It's just you and the author and kind of getting lost in their world. And then if you want, there's those features that go beyond a book. I found it really helpful as I've been reading through some novels to actually look up a word that I didn't know the meaning to, or when I'm with my son, we can get some help on some vocabulary builder type stuff, and he can be more challenged. I think that's it's there when you want it, and we try to ensure that we're removing distractions for customers. But if they want help and they want to go deeper, we love that electronic, the technology allows us to go beyond a book and let customers go a little bit deeper if they want to.
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. Well, back to the basic Kindle, the review copy that came was the white cover. My Paperwhite is the black. I like the white better. It just seemed lighter, cooler, something. Can you say which model people prefer, which color people prefer, the white or the black, or what? How does that choice look to you from your perspective?
Yeah, we're excited to offer customers choice, and so we love that we have the Kindle product in white and black and white. Without kind of going into the specific mixes, it does vary by country, but white is very popular. White's a popular color, not just for Kindle, but for iPhone and for tablets. White remains a very popular color. So we see a good percent of customers choose that, and we're super excited to be able to offer that choice.
Now, if somebody is starting out and they're looking at this Kindle as maybe their entry to the experience, this Kindle comes with 4 gigabytes of storage. If they go to start in at the Paperwhite, that starts out with 8 gigabytes, and then there's a 32 gigabyte choice. How, in sort of layman's terms, number of books or number of Audible books that you could have, what kind of guidance would you have for a customer to to make that choice between something that has 4 gigabytes storage versus 8 that you'd get on the entry-level Paperwhite?
Yeah, so 4 gigabytes holds thousands of books and about 14 audiobooks. So that's kind of, if you were to break down and compare between content types, 8 gigabytes obviously extends, kind of doubles that. From a customer perspective, what we find is customers love their book collections. I can see you got your library behind you. You're an avid Kindle customer, and yet plenty physical books lying around. And my own anecdote was watching my dad slowly build his book library in his office and consuming at first half of a wall, then a whole wall, then another wall. And, ultimately kind of overwhelming his office with books. But so customers love to just have their library, and the fact that they can carry it with them, and the fact that customers use their Kindles and really view it as a key tool for them. And I don't know if it's a friend, but it's certainly a trusted companion and device. Customers like to build out that library, and given that they own our device for long periods of time, having that extra storage kind of gives them the confidence to have those books with them. Of course, we make everything available in the cloud, so whenever they're connected, they can always go get a book if they do want to keep it off the device. So we try to offer kind of choice along those lines.
Mm-hmm. I think in the past, Amazon has said that the Paperwhite is the best-selling model of the Kindle. Mm-hmm. Can you say whether that's still the case with this latest configuration of the lineup?
Yeah. Paperwhite remains our most popular product, and when we think about as we look at our product lineup, it's really what we feel like, and customers tell us, is a great intersection of value. So we have the 6-inch, 300 ppi screen with the 5 LEDs to create a really clean, uniform screen experience. We have the flush front that we chatted about, the waterproofing feature, which was previously available only on Oasis. You have the increased storage that we were just discussing. If you want to spend $40 less, we've got a great option now that has that front light. And if you want to spend more and have the 7-inch display with the page turn buttons and an ergonomic design, we've got choice for you there. So Paperwhite kind of remains the most popular product, but we're excited that on either end, customers can have choice.
Now, I think another improvement in the basic Kindle is it's one generation up in e-ink screen. What's the name of the current technology that you're using in this one for the e-ink screen?
This is the Carta 1.2, and the prior incarnation was the Pearl.
If you had a Pearl screen versus a Carta screen in front of you, would you really be able to see much of a difference?
I think so. So one is contrast. So it's just a crisper screen. If you're familiar with our prior Paperwhite program that we previous to what we launched last year, it used the same technology. So it's just a crisper screen with better clarity. There's also a little difference in terms of as you turn pages, how frequently the whole screen flashes. So you have a little longer period of time before the screen flashes.
I see. And some new software improvements were talked about at the time that this Kindle was introduced, and I think that one of them was, and I haven't found it yet on my devices, but is there currently a way to automatically have your archive divided into books that you've read and books that you haven't read? Is that one of the features?
Correct. It's coming soon through a free software update.
Okay.
So you're not missing it. It's not available to customers yet, but it will be coming shortly. So that's kind of what we consider mark as read, so you know what's been read and what is to be read. So as you complete a book, it will note it as such in your library, and then sync that across all the other surfaces in which you have the Kindle app installed.
Capacitive Touch, I think that's another change. This Kindle has Capacitive Touch. What was the previous technology called that wasn't Capacitive Touch?
Yeah, it was infrared. So we basically had a technology that went across the screen. This prevents objects other than your finger from turning the page. So it requires the similar technology that's used in phones and tablets to actually turn the page.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other software improvements coming that will be available on all three models in the coming months?
So the one that we mentioned it a little bit earlier, and you probably experienced it on your Paperwhite device, is the new home screen. So the new home screen, you can now scroll and get a little bit more real estate and see more recommendations. as we were chatting about earlier, getting customers into a book that they might be interested in and getting them reading is really, a key part of our job. Gets, customers the most value out of their devices, and, kind of really solidifies that content experience. It also services free content and content you might have access to as a Prime customer or Kindle Unlimited customer. So we really see that as a big improvement from a discovery perspective.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned that your reading habits have been sort of tracked the different relationships you've had professionally with the product. So, if you're reading a book, and you're also, we haven't talked about the other side of your work on the Fire tablets, but of course we can read Kindle books. And I read a lot on my Fire HD8. It seems like during the day I tend to read on the Fire HD8. Perhaps because I don't mind if every once in a while I'm going to go to Twitter, or if I want to look something up, it'll go straight to the web. It's just faster. I like the color. At night, I'm more on the e-ink screen, kind of back and forth, and I read on my big iPhone 10 Max and all that. How would you describe the terrain of your reading across the devices when you're reading a book in different settings and places?
Yeah, it's interesting, kind of weekday versus weekend. So for me, on the weekday, I'm a bus commuter into Amazon. So we have a shuttle service, and I ride 20 to 30 minutes each way each day. So on the bus, it's I aspire to use the Kindle. I will admit that the phone and the tablet are both friends on the bus as well, depending on what I'm doing and how interesting that book is. So if you get to that last few chapters of a Harry Potter book, it tends to be whatever device I can get my hands on. But at night, on the weekdays, it's always the Kindle. So right now I'm using our Paperwhite. I was using our Oasis for a while. I was using the Kindle you have as we were going through testing. So I've kind of tried them all. But at night, for me, that longer reading session, really kind of sitting and being able to enjoy for 30 minutes or so before we go to bed is my preferred device. On the weekends, it's also it's the Paperwhite device. It's a Kindle. So more frequently vertical on the weekend, sitting in the chair, sitting on the couch, and my son will be reading, and I'll read next to him. He actually drew a sign and placed it on the couch so that Mom could see it that said, "Reading, please do not disturb." So it was our own private little sanctuary there. For his 6-year-old sister as well. I think she got a kick out of it. But on the weekends, I tend to use the Kindle device and put the phone away and put the tablets away when I'm with my children. That's
interesting, because that way you're sort of protecting that weekend space for family, or your mind isn't quite moving as fast or as intensely as it has to at work. I'm sure it's sort of an outward visible sign that you're trying to live in a different space on the weekend. Yeah, and just the distraction-free piece is so key to me. And with work and email and everything else that happens in this modern age, good to physically be apart from it so that you cannot find yourself distracted. Otherwise, you might slip back into checking an email, and 30 minutes later you're doing something you wish you weren't. So it's fun to just have the Kindle. I've had the experience too. My wife always reads on a Kindle. She doesn't have a tablet and hates to read on her phone. And sometimes we'll say, "All right, let's read together." This is what people do when they've been married as long as we are. And I say, "Yes, let's do that." And I'll feel like if she's on her Kindle and I'm on my Fire tablet, I'm somehow not with her as much as if I also was reading on the Kindle. That I have only brought a certain proportion of my mind and attention into the room, into her presence, reading a book. And I think she notices it. She kind of, I can't remember anything specific, but I'll feel a little judgment coming her way, saying, "I thought we were going to be reading together, exactly. And there you are on that stupid tablet." Yep. When you're on the Kindle, there's only one thing you're doing. So I think it's a good way to be for as a customer, as a consumer, and we're excited that we get to bring that to customers. Yeah. Well, let's finish with some cool stuff that you're reading on your Kindles and your Fires. What's a book that you'd recommend? In addition to the Harry Potter series, yes. Which I've been told is going to be quite popular, and 20-some years after the fact, I've finally started to catch up to the rest of society. Highly recommend that. I just read Deep Work, which I found fascinating. I don't know if you've read that book. I've heard that. He basically describes kind of
how the human mind and body work, and how if you actually want to make breakthroughs in your work or your whatever your career may be, it really comes from undistracted, concentrated time that you can spend. Cal Newport, is the author's name, really comes from kind of concentrated, uninterrupted time. And he then gives is highly convincing in that's how everybody works, and he makes a very compelling case. And then he goes through strategies to actually create that space in your life so that you can actually be productive. And so, as someone at Amazon with a few things on my plate and a few things to do, I found it very useful to read that book. And, if I can adopt 20% of what he recommends, I think I would make some big leaps forward.
Yeah.
So I highly recommend that book.
Yeah, I spotted that. I think I reached out to him and tried to get an interview with him because I think he'd be fascinating to... Does he mention the Kindle, as we've been talking, as a way to... do research more deeply, or to as a tool in his when he talks about ways to do deep work that are effective?
He has another book that my wife is reading. My wife read deep work as well, called Digital Minimalism, I believe. And I think he mentions it in there, maybe by name. In deep work, he definitely mentions it in concept, which is if you're going to, if you want to do something electronically, put it in airplane mode, turn off the distracting components of it. So I don't believe he mentions Kindle specifically in deep work, but he certainly alludes to the concept of, being undistracted is a key way to get deeper in the topics you're interested in.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, anything else about this cool new basic Kindle that we haven't talked about that when you think back 20 years from now you're going to particularly remember? Or
I think we went over the key points. Now we're really excited that we have a lineup now that includes a front light, which we know is a feature customers really love and have loved since the first day we introduced it. So we're proud of that, and we're pleased that we're shipping the devices to customers now, and we're excited to keep selling and get more customers to read.
Excellent. I have been speaking with Allen Hughes, Amazon's Director of Sales and Marketing for Kindle e-readers and Fire tablets. Thanks very much, Allen.
Thank you, Len. It was great chatting with you. Take care.
One of the things I enjoyed about that conversation with Allen was the fact that I graduated from Harvard Business School 32 years before he did. And in talking a little bit about before we started recording, a lot of his experience was the same of mine, the intensity of the 3 cases each day. And he found time to be part of an extracurricular club. He was the head of the Tech Media Club at HBS. And I had a 2-year-old daughter, Sarah, at the time. So I had a pretty full plate too. But fun to see somebody going through the same institution that I went through and then ending up at a job at Amazon, which is obviously pretty exciting and I can relate to in a kind of Walter Mitty way. I also want to thank Amazon's inside and outside PR team. They always do a good job setting up interviews, but particularly this time I was traveling in South Bend, Indiana, and the back and forth by email with Paige Weber and her team was efficient, timely, and they're fun to work with. So always, a lot of you don't see the background sometimes when these interviews get set up with busy people at Amazon, but that part of the team is always really helpful to me. So well done, and thank you all. I have a comment I want to pass along from John Aga, who noticed kind of an error that I made in the last episode when I was talking about the new Kindle. He says, "Hi, Len, I have to correct you on the weight of the Paperwhite 4. I checked out the Paperwhite 4 stats using the Amazon shopping app on my Fire HD 10. Amazon states that Paperwhite 4 weighs 6.4 ounces, not 6.8 ounces, as I had said. The new basic Kindle is 6.1 ounces. I don't believe a 0.3 ounce difference would feel like much of a difference. The flat screen 32 gigabyte internal storage and water resistance is worth a lot to me. Big thumbs up regarding the Paperwhite 4. I also got the Amazon water resistance cloth cover. It works great." Well, John, I think I did have some confusion there. Your numbers do track the specs for the Kindle and the Paperwhite Wi-Fi only models. Where I got led astray is that I was comparing the basic Kindle, which is only available in Wi-Fi only, with a Paperwhite that I have that has 3G. So that one weighs a little bit more. It's 6.8 ounces compared with 6.4 for the Wi-Fi only. when I put the two devices on our kitchen scale, the basic Kindle weighed in at 6 ounces even, and that was 3/4 of an ounce less than the Paperwhite 3G. So I think that's why when I held them in my hands, I did think I could feel that 3/4 of an ounce difference in weight between the Paperwhite 3G and the Wi-Fi. But anyway, I wanted to clear that up and appreciate that John spotted that. That's it for this week. Darlene and I attended Austin Kleon's reading at the Tattered Cover. I made a recording. I think the quality was pretty good, and we're going to have a short week next week because we're flying to St. Louis on Wednesday and then out to Boston for my mother's 90th birthday. So I'm really going to have about 2 days to put the show together. And I reached out to the founder of the remarkable tablet for an interview. I really would like to talk to him, but haven't heard back yet. So I think what I might do is bring you some of particularly the Q&A of Austin's talk here in Denver as the main kind of feature for next week's show, unless I can come up with something on short notice Monday or Tuesday. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from downtown Denver. I really appreciate your taking the time to listen to my show. Have a great day. Bye.